It's not only Berliners who are shocked at being abandoned to the Russians. Eisenhower's ally, Field Marshal Montgomery, British commander of Allied forces in northern Germany, is equally appalled and frustrated. Unlike Eisenhower, Montgomery believes it's vital to gain control over Europe's main cities before the Soviets do. He doesn't trust them. The Russians have already installed puppet regimes in the countries they liberated. Therefore, Berlin became a prime objective for Montgomery. When Eisenhower overrules him, it's another blow to their already rocky relationship.
My father thought Eisenhower was a very great man. As a person, as a diplomat, as a statesman, he had a huge regard for him. When Eisenhower decided to take personal control, which my father thought was an error, he thought it was either should be him commanding the Americans or Bradley commanding the whole operation, both of whom have experienced battlefield commanders, Monty and Bradley. But Eisenhower decided to keep the two fronts separate and advance along both fronts, with Monty in the north and Bradley in the south. The problem with going forward on all fronts is there wasn't the logistic ability to be able to do that.
Montgomery's new objective is to cross the Elbe River and push north to the Baltic Sea. His mission is to seal off the German forces in Scandinavia, but more importantly, to prevent the Soviets from reaching Denmark. He knows that once in Denmark, the communists would control the entire Baltic. A British commando, Cliff Morris, is with Montgomery's forces pushing towards the Baltic. It's been a long, tough year for him. He was among the very first to come ashore in France on D-Day. He keeps a daily diary.
We've been staying here for 10 days, during which we've been having a smashing time, getting well fed, plenty of rest and recreation. The intelligence officer crossed the Elbe under cover of a white flag and entered the town of Lauenburg. He approached the enemy and asked them to surrender. They refused, as the town was being held by the SS. They said they would fight for it. We have given them 48 hours to think it over before action begins.
The Allies are crushing the German army all across Europe. They've cut off their food and fuel. Without these staples, the Nazi war machine is powerless. Now the war itself is grinding to a halt. However, in the Netherlands, the war has reached a stalemate. The Canadian First Army has liberated most of the country, but the Germans still occupy the west. To punish the Dutch for aiding the Allies, the Nazis have cut off their food supplies. Nearly 1,000 people are dying each day of starvation. If the Allies attack, the Germans threaten to blow up the North Sea dikes, flooding the country and killing thousands more. Eisenhower is trying to negotiate a truce with the German command in Holland, so the Allies can airlift food to the starving Dutch. Without an agreement, the Germans could shoot down any aircraft coming in. Captain Farley Mowat is an intelligence officer with the 1st Canadian Liberation Brigade in Holland.
My job is looking for German weapons, weapons of mass destruction, we'd say today. I didn't find too many, as we say today.
Ken Cottam, a fellow intelligence officer, has a daring idea. Working independently, they can speed up the truce negotiations with the Germans. But what he proposes is not only illegal, but extremely dangerous.
Cottam decided that we should do something really extravagant and interesting, and it was just at the end of the war. We knew that the whole thing was going to be over shortly. So what he arranged, actually, was through some friend of his in the German intelligence, of safe conduct to cross into the German-occupied part of Holland and go to the headquarters of the German district regional commander, General Blaskowitz, in Hilversum. And he wanted me to go along, too.
With command structures breaking down and increasingly disrupted communications, many regional German units are trying to cut their own deals.
Ken has persuaded senior staff that it's imperative to establish direct talks between ourselves and General Blaskowitz. He's just received a message from the general saying that he'd like to discuss a separate truce with the Allies. We're going to cross over German lines tomorrow. I am more than a little nervous.
Their secret journey into the heart of Nazi territory will have consequences far beyond their wildest ambitions. In Italy, the war has left the country in chaos. The regime of the fascist dictator, Hitler's ally Benito Mussolini, has collapsed. The Allies are battling their way north, defeating German forces with the help of local armed resistance groups. Convoys of defeated Nazis and their sympathizers are trying to escape the country. It's early morning. Urbano Lazzaro is a member of a resistance group that has taken control of a small town on the shores of Lake Como. He's about to be part of an event that will engrave his name in history. The group's leader has news that a German convoy is approaching, making for neutral Switzerland. Apparently it's carrying a very important passenger. The resistance has agreed with the Germans that they can stop and search all vehicles. Germans can leave, but any Italians trying to sneak out will be arrested. The fascists must answer for their crimes.
Documenti, andiamo. Documenti.
Urbano Lazzaro is about to catch a very big fish.
Documenti, andiamo. Camerata. Eccellenza. Cavaliere Benito Mussolini. Nel nome del popolo italiano io ti arresto.
Io non ho fatto niente.
Ha capovolto quello che era la mia concezione.
It was a real shock to see this powerful man who commanded 54 million Italians reduced to nothing. It really struck me.
A niente. Quello è quello che mi ha colpito di più in quel momento.
In the car following the convoy, they find an Italian woman. She is Mussolini's mistress, Clara Petacci.
Benito! Cosa succede? Ma cosa ti hanno fatto?
The resistance holds them prisoner in the town hall, along with other members of his government, also caught, trying to escape. Later, Mussolini and his mistress are transferred to a more secure location up in the hills. The plan is to take them to Milan to stand trial.
Se avevano nelle scuole elementari.
At school, they had taught us to adore Mussolini. They presented him to us as a divine being. He was the destiny of our nation. He was going to save Italy and the Italian people and give us back the glory days of the Roman Empire.
Imperiali di Roma, imperiali di 2000 anni prima. Quando ho incominciato a vedere che la verità era.
Then I began to see the truth was very different.
Mussolini.
I started to see the injustice.
Cominciato ad accorgermi, per esempio.
For example, my father was ill with diabetes and needed insulin injections. But the fascists took his insulin away. He was all alone because my mother was in prison. When I got home, his legs had become gangrenous. He died that August.
Well, Mussolini's capture actually doesn't make that much difference to the Allies' campaign in Italy, and the reason is that their recent offensive, backed by an uprising of starving Italian civilians, already has the Germans on the run. Also, some of the senior German commanders in Italy have actually been negotiating with the Allies for some time, and they're on the verge of signing an unofficial surrender. Mussolini knows this, and he also knows that without his German backers, his fascist regime can't survive.
Any satisfaction General Eisenhower feels over the Italian campaign is overshadowed by two grave concerns. Can he prevent the German SS from making a bloody last stand in the Bavarian Alps? And more urgently, can he secure a truce with the German command in Holland, so he can start airlifting in food to alleviate the growing famine? More are dying each day. What Eisenhower doesn't know is that in Holland, two Canadians, Farley Mowat and Ken Cottam, have already embarked on a secret, dangerous mission behind enemy lines. These two officers are attempting to speed up the truce that will mean food for the starving Dutch.
Unlikely as it may seem, I'm presently sitting in a very large greenhouse. Believe it or not, this is the Resistance headquarters. Who would have conceived of putting their headquarters in a greenhouse? Clever, really, as it is surely the last place the Germans would have looked for it. Though with all the glass being rattled by the thump of grenades exploding nearby, I'm beginning to wish I was back in the Germans' camp.
The day before, the two Canadians had driven across no man's land to meet the German commander-in-chief, General Blaskowitz.
Well, it was very scary driving into German-occupied territory before the truce was established. I mean, you really didn't know what the hell was going to happen. But it was also wildly exhilarating. If you had enough rum in you, and I always made sure that I did, you could manage it all right. I would hate to have done it sober. But once or twice we ran into German columns, and one was an SS column in their black uniforms, looking very, very frightening. The recognition of the fact that this wasn't a German car, and it wasn't filled with German soldiers, came over these guys. It was like a comic film. You could almost see the expressions change in their face, you know. Maybe they were just too surprised.
Mowat and Cottam survive the... It's not only Berliners who are shocked at being abandoned to the Russians. Eisenhower's ally, Field Marshal Montgomery, British commander of Allied forces in northern Germany, is equally appalled and frustrated. Unlike Eisenhower, Montgomery, when Eisenhower overrules him, it's another blow to their already rocky relationship.
My father thought Eisenhower was a very great man. As a person, as a diplomat, as a statesman, he had a huge regard for him. When Eisenhower decided to take personal control, which my father thought was an error, he thought it was either should be him commanding the Americans or Bradley commanding the whole operation, both of whom have experienced battlefield command.
Montgomery believes it's vital to gain control over Europe's main cities before the Soviets do. He doesn't trust them. The Russians have already installed puppet regimes in the countries they liberated. Therefore, Berlin became a prime objective for
commanders, Monty and Bradley. But Eisenhower decided to keep the two fronts separate and advance along both fronts, with Monty in the north and Bradley in the south. The problem with going forward on all fronts